So curve piecing can be such a challenge, and it's one of those things, at least for me, that I was kind of afraid to try until I started this project. Before I get started on this tutorial, my name is Chris O'Neill from Sew the Distance. Thank you for joining me today as I start a new series that I'm calling Making It Modern. So as many of you know, if you follow my channel, I have a series called Lessons from an Old Quilt. And I've just been so inspired by these old quilts, and I decided that it was time to kind of take some of these patterns that I see or some of the techniques that I see in the old quilts and make them in a modern way and give a tutorial on how to do that. My goal is to have a video up each month with some of my favorite quilts that I've featured in Lessons from an Old Quilt. So the first one I'm going to start with is the Circle Quilt that I featured, and I'll put a link here to that. It is a great quilt, and I did talk about how it was constructed, and I also decided to develop a pattern for it. And I changed the sizes some, and I also brought the technique up to date, but it is a really, really neat quilt, and I'm so happy to share this pattern on how to make this quilt, or one at least similar to this quilt. The actual template is on my blog, and you can download it, and that's going to be available until at least the end of July of 2021. After that, I'll have it on my Etsy shop with a full pattern on how to make a quilt using this technique. So let's also talk a little bit about modern, what I mean by that. So there's many definitions of modern in the quilting world, and True Blue Quilts did a great segment on this, explaining the different types of modern. What do we think of as quilters when we hear the word modern? The definition I'm using for this series is taking an old pattern and bringing it up to date using techniques that we would use now. So maybe some specialty rulers, or just some other wonderful modern conveniences that we have, even if it's just more modern fabrics. Below, I will have timestamps for each section of this video, so you can go right to that section. So for example, if you really just want to know how to curve piece and some of my tips on that, you can click on the link below to take you to that portion of this video. So let's get started constructing this really cool circle block. The general supplies that you will need for this project are paper scissors, fabric scissors, pins, the templates, a pen or pencil. You won't see these marks, so it can just be a regular ballpoint pen, a ruler for squaring up the blocks, and then optional are tweezers and very small fabric scissors. You will also need an iron, ironing board, sewing machine, and neutral thread. I used gray. For each block unit, before you cut it on the diagonal, you will need one 7 1/4 inch square and two 4-inch squares. To make this table topper or large mug rug, you will need 4 fabrics. From each of the 4 fabrics, you will cut one 7 1/4 inch square and two 4-inch squares, for a total of 4 7 1/4 inch squares and 8 4-inch squares. You will need a 15-inch square for the backing and a 14-inch square for the batting. For the binding, I used a strip piece that measures 2.5 inches by 65 inches. This will give you lots of extra as you're attaching your binding. So we're going to start out by making this particular block, and as you can see, this is like a bow tie shape almost, and then these are the curved pieces that we're going to put on. So if I turn it over, you can see how it is constructed, and then after that we're going to slice it in half this way. But first, let's just make the block, and I'll show how to do the curved piecing. So you can download, like I said, the pattern for this. Hopefully this works. If not, it is just a drunkard's path block with 2 notches out of it. Okay, so you can use any size you want. This particular one calls for 7 1/4 inch square, and it should line up perfectly, which it does, right on your bigger square. What I'm going to do is turn this over. It is symmetrical, so you don't have to worry about which side you cut on. Line that up. I'm just going to take a pen and draw my curves. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same with our 4-inch squares. Again, it doesn't matter, but I will flip it over. Draw right on that. And the same with this one. And you're going to cut out directly on the lines using your fabric scissors. Take your time doing this. You want it to be accurate. Okay, now a tip for this one. You're going to do the same thing where you're going to cut on the line you drew as best as you can, as accurately as you can. However, because this shape is similar to this, you don't want this to get confused with these pieces. So what I do is I just cut off a tip of that, and then I'll put this in my scrap pile. This way I'm not tempted to use this one for my curved piecing because it is absolutely not the right size. I'm going to do the other one. Okay, so there are your pieces. You can see here. We're going to clip this one like I said, so I'm not tempted to use it. And here. And that is your block. So now is the, I don't know, kind of fun part for me because I've been doing this so many times. I've made so many curved pieces, but I know it can be very intimidating for people as it was for me when I started too. So there's a few tricks to this. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to fold these in half this way. Now the bow tie piece or this main piece, you're going to fold one direction. So I'm doing right sides together, as you can see. I'm just going to line it up. These I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to fold them right sides out, and I'll show you why in a minute. And I'm going to press them really, really well so I get a nice crease in them. Okay, so I'll take this to the iron, press them. You can even finger press them, but it's better to just have a nice crease in them. Okay, so these are nice and creased. You can see really heavy crease in them, and that's what you want. So now we're going to pin, and I really tried my best to figure out the best way to do this for myself mostly because I've really never done it. So we're going to pin, and as you can see, because we did opposites of the pressing, this is going to nest right into that middle. So just like that, like a V. Do you see that? So it has like a V shape and it nests right in there. It's really nice. So I know that's the middle, and I'm going to start pinning. I'm going to use bigger pins than I normally do just because I want you to see it, but I'm going to pin once right in that center. It is critical that you pin well for this project. I can't stress it enough. It is so important. So next I'm going to go and pin this side. Now here's another tip that I came up with. This is going to be the same length. This side here is going to be the same length as this side. Okay, so what I did, because it made my life easier, is I lined them up and I pinned right here on that edge. So you can see that edge? That's not where you're going to sew, but it's going to stabilize this while we pin the rest. And I'm going to go up here, match up those points really well, like that. And I am going to pin right there. And then I'm going to pin that curve, making sure that that stays straight. This is tricky. I'm not trying to scare you or anything like this, but it does take some practice, and it really is important that you pin really well. Again, I'm using bigger pins than I normally would, just because I want you to see them. And it's fidgety. You have to kind of play with it and get that lined up. Worth it, but it takes some time. The first one I did, first couple, probably even the first 10 that I did, it took me quite a long time to pin these. And then I got a little bit better at it, just like anything else. Okay, I got a little pleat in there. I'm gonna have to take that pin out. Put that over. I'm even gonna throw yet another pin in there. Like I said, I'd use little pins, but so you can see it's not very pretty, but it works. And then I just take this pin out that was holding the other side. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side here. I'm going to line up those edges really well. You can see how I line them up. I'm going to put a pin in there, and then I go here and pin. Let me try that again. And I pin that edge. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pin that curve, making sure it's lined up, and put our pins in. Now I'm putting my pins in like this, with the straight edge, or the ball of it at the top here, you can see. Because as I'm sewing, I'm going to pull those pins out. Just like that. So there's quite a few, and then I'm going to take this anchoring pin out, and I'm going to now sew. Now when I sew, I'm going to sew this side, okay? And I'm going to, all you have to worry about is that 1/4 inch, okay? So if you see some pleats below it, that's okay. You're going to just worry about a 1/4 inch in, and you're going to sew along that edge. And I'm going to show you how I do that now. Okay, so we have our curved piece pinned really well on this, and you can see on this side too. And you're going to, as you sew this through, you're going to be taking the pins out. And like I said, you want to go nice and slow. Okay, so I'm going to place this under my presser foot right at that corner, making sure it's nice and tight. And I know that this here, right in here, I'll use these, right in here is a 1/4 inch on my machine. I also have my tape lining it up. I used a 1/4 inch foot when I first started doing this, but it became a pain in the neck because it didn't have anything over here on this other side, on the right side, to hold the fabric down, and it just didn't do as well. So this is what I'm doing, just using my standard foot on my Janome, and I'm going to start sewing. And I'm going to go nice and slow, and the first one I'm going to just show you in real time, just so you can see exactly how slow I'm going. Now remember, you just need the 1/4 inch, so when you get back here where there's more pleats and stuff, you don't have to worry about that because you just want that 1/4 inch to be sewn. So I'm going to keep going, pull pins out as I go. There's no reason to rush. And notice I'm sewing with the bow tie part side up, okay? Now here's notice also I'm keeping my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Here's another tip. If it gets off at all, you can take your tweezers and just pull it as you sew, but be very careful because you do not want to sew over your finger. Pulling them out, making sure I have a good 1/4 inch clearance. Here's a good example where I might pull this over a little. Pull the next one out, adjust, use my tweezers, pull that over, and pull out my last one. Cut your seam, cut your threads, and you can see that your seam is done. Now, naturally, this is going to lay to one side or the other. For this block where I have the dark as the bow tie and the light as the curve, I'm going to make it so it presses or lays to this side, the side to the dark. That's going to help you later when we're lining up the blocks. All right, however, I'm not going to press this with an iron yet. I'm going to put my next one on because I want to keep these creases so I can keep everything lined up. So I'm going to show you how I add the next piece. And here it is. Again, lining them up, making sure they're straight and in that groove. I'm going to start in the middle and place a pin. I'm going to line this edge up with this edge and put a temporary pin to hold that. So I can work. I'm going to line up this corner with this corner really well. Add a pin. And then I'm going to start by pinning this curve in place. Okay, notice I know I sewed with the bow tie part up, but I pin with the curved part up. And because I'm putting the pins in this way, so perpendicular to the fabric, it doesn't matter because I can pull the heads of the pins out as I sew. The more pins, the better, especially as you start doing this, as you're learning to do it. You can't have too many pins with this process. I'm going to take my temporary pin out. I'm going to line these two up on the other side, do the exact same thing. Now this particular pattern, these are the exact same size. So this line and this line are the exact same size. That's not always the case when you're curve piecing. So just know your pattern, know what's expected. Right there, and then I'm going to start pinning my curve. Now if you're making a bunch of these, you can sit in front of the TV, pin all your curves, at least on one side. Get them all lined up and ready to go. Okay, and now we're going to sew again. I'll speed this part up. Okay, so there you have it. Looks like I have a little tiny, maybe a little bit of a pucker in there, but not bad. And that's okay, that'll press out. And I'm going to press these to the side. Now, if your sewing isn't as accurate as you'd like, if you're still learning that 1/4 inch seam, you can always go in and clip these so they lay nicer, but you don't have to if you get that 1/4 inch seam pretty good. Just make sure you don't clip through your seam that you just made, but that'll help that lay flatter. Okay, I'm going to go press this and I'm going to show you our next step on squaring it up. Okay, so we have our block here that we just made. You can see it's all curved pieced and I pressed it really well. And I did press it towards the dark, like I said. Now I need to square this up, and this can be another tricky part with these curves. So what you want to do is you want 3.5 inches from this edge to this part where the curve meets, okay? And this is very important. So that's what I'm going to try my best to make sure happens here. I'm a little off, but that's okay because this is what happens when you work with fabric. So that's close. I'm going to split the difference between the two because they're not perfect. Actually, if I pull it in a little, I might get it perfect. Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to trim that up. on these two sides, just this side and this side. Okay. Next, I'm going to rotate it so the cut pieces that I just did are on this side and this side. And I'm going to do the exact same thing where I'm going to make sure that I have 3.5 for each, and then my block measures 7. So I'm lining up down here on my 7, and it should work out. Of course, it always works out when you practice doing it. Oh, look at that, it does, it's working out. Put that over there, make sure it's nice and straight, and cut my 2 other edges. And there you go. Now you have a 7-inch square, and it should be just about perfect. So you're going to line that up on your mat. So your points, that line goes right through those points. And you're going to take a ruler and line it up, which, let's see if I can get that lined up, and I'm going to get a bigger ruler. Okay, make sure everything's lined up straight. See how I have my edge lined up on this line? I have my points lined up here, and I'm going to slice. Just like that. Okay, so now I have 2 pieces, and I'm going to do the same with my others. Do this with all 4. I'm going to just show 2. But you do this with all 4. Line that up nice and straight. Okay, so now you have these half square triangles from the curved piecing that you just made, and now you're going to put them together, okay? Okay, so all 4 of our blocks are finished and they are sliced. So you can see that here, okay? So now it's time to mix them up and to form our pattern. So you can play with this a little bit. Because there are only 4 colors in this, it's kind of easy. You can just place them like, just swap every other one here and get a nice design. Actually, I don't like these 2 together, so let's swap this. There, I actually like that a lot. Okay, so that's what I'm going to stick with. And your next step is to sew these half square triangles. Now, because of the way we pressed, these 2 should nest because they were both pressed to the dark. So they will nest in nicely like that and like that. And I'm going to sew along this edge. Now remember, this is a bias, and we have some curved piecing in there, so it can be a little wonky. Be very careful, do not pull or stretch as you sew this. So I'm going to go sew these together and come back and join you. Okay, so I sewed these all together, and I can't remember if this is the exact configuration that I had before or not. But what's really cool about this block is you can do it this way where you have the circle in the middle, or you can swap them out like this, which I really like. And if your piecing isn't perfect, this is a really nice way to do it. Let me do that. So your half circles are on the sides here, you can see. And that way, you know, you don't notice that big circle in the middle. And I really like this layout. This is what I did for this one. I just put everything towards the middle. And all I do is sew these together like you would regular squares. You can trim up those dog ears if you want, press it, and you're done with your top for your table topper using this method. So I did make a Christmas one. Let me show you that one. And I used just 2 fabrics, and you can see how cool the effect of that is, and I finished this up. But I did want to show you that the values of the fabrics, the color values of the fabrics really do make a difference, because the first table topper I made was this one. And you can see how it doesn't really work. The colors are kind of, I don't know, it doesn't scream Christmas. It was too dark and too light, and it just didn't give the contrast that I was looking for. So be careful about that. Finally, I made a ton of these blocks learning how to do this so I could teach this. And you can see I have quite a stack here, and they are all scrappy. So this is a really fun project to do as a scrappy quilt, and they go together. These are a little smaller because again, I was working with the sizes, but so you can see how the scrappy look really is cool too. I'm going to put these up on my design board and show you exactly what I'm talking about. So here are some blocks, some scrappy blocks that I made in a configuration with the circle in the middle, but you can see that secondary pattern where the pieces come together and it shows up so nicely. Now if you turn these blocks just a little bit, you can make a whole nother layout, which is kind of cool, that shows some curves. So let me show you what I mean. So you can see how the curves show up like through here, and just your eye falls down through this way, and you can see how if you played with color this would be really interesting. So let me show one more configuration. Okay, just by placing these blocks on point, you can get a really interesting table runner out of it. I just love this layout as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this block, and like I said, you can download the template on my blog for at least another month and a half or so, and after that it will be in my Etsy shop. So check that out. I have a link below to that. I am looking forward to sharing more antique quilts in a modern way with you in the upcoming months. If you haven't done so, please consider subscribing, giving me that thumbs up, and even commenting. I love hearing from you. And I'll see you soon back here on Sew the Distance. Have a great day, and make sure you take some time to sew.